everybody. We're so happy that everybody's here tonight, and we're just going to have a good time, and we're just so grateful for all of you for coming. We want to thank the Williamson County Library and Williamson County TV for being the video people that video this tonight, so we want to thank them for this. They've done the last several, and we're so grateful. And we want to thank all of you again for coming. And at this time, we want to go ahead and get started. We have our board chair, Pam Wright. You have anything you'd like to say, Pam? She's back there.
Just welcome and thank you for taking the time out of this busy evening to join us. I know that you have a wonderful experience and just learn so great insight, knowledge from our wonderful speakers. So let's give her an applause.
Yes, we have mental health issues in our nation, in our world. We have a mental health crisis. So when Erica told us that she would come and speak, we were so excited and so happy because this is a topic that we all need to hear about, and we need to learn more, and we need to be acceptable and understand when people are dealing with mental health issues and a crisis, because we ourselves, we have family members, we ourselves could be in this situation. So we're going to learn a lot from Erica today, and I just cannot wait. She's a member of the Pioneer family, the Lee family, according to Miss Thelma Battle. We honor the Pioneer family. And Miss Thelma Battle knows, so you're a member of the Pioneer family, Erica. You probably didn't know that, did you? We'll let Erica tell about herself, because I'm going to be wasting time. She's amazing. She has a business. She's going to tell you all about herself. She has a full hour. We have an hour. We have time for Q&A. So at this time, we want to welcome a Franklin native, wonderful, wonderful leader in the community, doing a lot of things in the community. She has her own business, and she's making a difference and helping a lot of people. So at this time, please give a warm, warm welcome to Mrs. Erica Gentry. I promise you I'm printing off your bio. It is in the car, and it's not.
I have a slide that sort of works now. I'll break it down.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. Well, hello everybody. Before I get started, I just want to say, I try to be very informal. I feel like this is very formal. I do have slides, but it just sort of helps to guide, and I know that we have all different kind of learners here. And so the slides will give a lot of information. Also, too, at any point, I'll ask you, do you have comments, questions? Please elaborate. It's not that type of, I'm going to go through my slides and y'all just sit here and listen, okay? So things come up, write down your questions, and we will go from there. So pretty much, I want to thank Ms. Alma for reaching out to me. The focus today is just looking at community and mental health. I do have some statistics that I have locally in Williamson County. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. And so pretty much today's focus is it takes both connection and community to promote mental health. You're going to see how important connection is. I know, Ms. Alma has said, there is a crisis. There's been a crisis when it comes to the lack of understanding when it comes to mental health, the drivers to mental health. But with connection and healthy relationships, we're going to talk about how that brain can be rewired and how connection really does help to build healing and resilience, okay? All right, so I am Erica Gentry. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, also licensed school social worker as well. Although I've never used that, I do have that as well. So I'm passionate about mental health. My focus has been trauma, anxiety, and depression. And so I'm a therapist, currently work at youth villages. So I do two things. I've been at youth villages going on 15 years. At youth villages, I'm a licensed program expert where I am over teams of people, about 4 or 5 teams, and it's called our Life Set program. If you watched the news the other week, you probably saw last week where we were celebrating those kids who had graduated, who are exiting care. And so pretty much that program that I am over at youth villages, I consult for them, and when their treatment plans come, I pretty much make sure that it's aligned with the model fidelity, and that's making sure that it's doing everything that they're supposed to do. So if we have a kid that's suicidal, we can't be working on transportation in school because safety comes first. We got to first alleviate that crisis. And so that's what I do. I also, too, had the opportunity to oversee teams in Chicago, which was more inner city. And their transitional living program there, I wish that when it came to Tennessee, they don't age out until 21 there, whereas here it's still 18, and they receive so many benefits there from transportation. They also have transitional living apartments where you have young mothers who may be parenting, you have young men. They have transitional living placements where they live and they get to live there until they age out. And during that time, we're working on components such as housing instability, because we know that they won't be there for always. So we're enhancing that when it comes to financial literacy. How's your employment? But most importantly, as we know, mostly all of them have experienced some form of trauma. And that typically hinders the process when it comes to trying to get them stabilized. So those are some things that we address as well. And so I started private practice right at the pandemic. I do that part-time, and the reason I decided to do that is because at the time I had so many people in the community coming saying, I want to talk to someone, but I don't feel comfortable, and I also there are not a lot of therapists that look like me. And that's for our Black and brown community. And so with that being said, I actually just being, and I'll be a little transparent to share along the way too. It was right after my bio dad had passed, I had to sit with some things. He had not been as active in my life. And so it's one thing when we look at grief, we always look at it when a person passes, but we don't typically look at how that has an impact while that person is still living. And then when they pass on, it's still like a lot to sit with, like, okay, I didn't miss you, but then I do miss you because you weren't there. It's just the whole thing that you got to process. So I was like, let me go back to my therapist on this. And so when I went there, which I love this therapist, she helped me through a lot of trauma things in my college years and things like that. But it was right after some of the things that we had seen with the killings of Breonna Taylor, and she just had questions for me. And pretty much her response on some things, she didn't present with a lot of empathy. And it was at that moment when I came home, I was like, you know what? It was like 1 a.m, I was up, and I was still heated. You know how you think about some things like, I should have said this, but I didn't. So at that time, I just decided, you know what? The time is now. So I decided at that point, I want to jump into it. I had my husband, Vandell, that really had already worked out a lot of the business side, getting credentialed and insurance and all of that. So I jumped into it, and then people just started coming, and we did telehealth for a while. Right now I'm back telehealth. But that's just about me. Also education, I guess. Went to Tennessee State University, TSU. Then went on to UT. I did the Nashville campus and got my master's of social work there. So that is pretty much what I focus on in private practice. I just want to help people process trauma so they can live life anew. It never gets perfect, but you can, adapt and find new ways. So today, the overview. I know there's some of these slides are gonna look familiar for the people who know me, because I probably talk about this all the time. Just bear with me, but we're gonna be pretty much, here are our points here. So our overview, pretty much today, we're gonna leave with mental health from an individualistic view, because it's as the individual. Then we're gonna look at the family systemic view. And then we're also gonna look at community, and then I'm gonna end with just that psychoeducational. The whole thing is pretty psychoed. But we'll go from there. And like I said, if you have questions or anything at any point, just raise your hand. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is that first developmental stage. This is pretty much trust versus mistrust. How many people are familiar with that first developmental stage? You've been around me, you probably hear me talk about it a lot. This stage is of the utmost importance. I think a lot of times we have downplayed it as a people, in the community, because we think that when babies are born, it don't matter, they're not gonna remember. But that connection, as soon as they come out, is so important, because as we're gonna talk about later, how trauma impacts the brain, also too, that connection helps to fully develop, where they're more socially aware, more keen, when you're talking to them, that eye contact, all of those things have to do with this first developmental stage, and that's the trust versus mistrust. How many people in here, just with a show of hands, how many people trust right off? I mean, when you meet new people, you trust right off. Like, I trust until you give me a reason not to. Okay, how many people are on the other end of the spectrum like, no, I gotta see what you're talking about. Trust must be earned. I'm not just trusting right off the gate. That would be me, too. And I don't know many people's stories in here. This is this stage where it pretty much, whether you're gonna trust or not, has been developed already in this first developmental stage. Because who are the first people that teach us whether the world is safe or not? Parents. Your parents. That caregiver, that parent is pretty much giving you the awareness of if my needs will be met or not. And so I tell people, especially young mothers all the time, like, and fathers, connection is so important. And so what happens if you have a baby, when that baby comes out, they cry, and that caregiver comes? What message does that baby get? I'm safe. What else? I heard something else over here. Somebody cares. Security. My needs will be met. Now let's talk about a baby that's on the other end of the spectrum who cries. And it's not just a baby, because sometimes too, through that toddler stage, it carries on. So cry. Nobody comes. Nobody says a thing. What does that baby take in? Y'all speak up, I can't hear. Nobody cares. My needs won't be met. And guess what the next step that child is going to do? They're going to learn how to meet their own needs. They're going to start to self-soothe, whether they're shake and rock. They're typically not as connected in most cases. There's always the exception. But when you look at trust versus mistrust, this is what we're talking about. And this is why this stage is sort of like building the trajectory of a person's life. And we're going to go down through a timeline in a second. And so trust versus mistrust. I can't say it enough how important this first stage is for healthy brain development, the connection, the trust, the attunement, just so many different things there. So don't wait until they like 6 and 7 when you think, oh, they understand what I'm saying now. No, the time is like right after, okay? All right, so speaking of this, core beliefs. We all have core beliefs. And going back to the beginning on whether you trust versus mistrust, your experiences shape how you show up and how you look at the world and others around you. So those people that are like, oh, I trust, until you give me a reason not to. The other people on the other end were like, no, I'm not. More than likely something shaped your experience where you're like, I'm not going to trust. Because more than likely at some point your need wasn't met, an emotional need, something happened that caused the disconnect to say, I need to be a little bit more guarded. So when we're looking at core beliefs here, all of us have them, okay? It may look different, and these are just some of them, not a whole list, but this is some of the things like when I'm working with clients on, we do cognitive behavioral therapy, that's just one approach, but we're looking at what are the things that life has taught you. What have your experiences, how has that shaped and molded you into how you believe about yourself and how you see others? And so as you see here, I'm unlovable. I cannot trust myself. I cannot trust. The world is unsafe. I should have known better. I don't deserve love. Some people feel powerless. In most cases, when you're looking at powerless, I should have known better. In most cases, these kind of cognitions will come with someone probably who has experienced some form of trauma in the form of abuse, sexual, emotional, thinking that I should have known better. Why did I allow it? And so those are just some of the things, not always though. And then I am shameful when things have happened, because that's another thing too, I think when it comes to the community, is that instead of working through, we shame. And what were you thinking? Why'd you do that? And so what that does is it just holds a person in bondage when you look at the benefit to that, and we know the benefit to shame, shame awakens us to our humility. Humility lets us know we're human. We're going to mess up. We're not going to always get it right. But that impairment to that, it's going to keep you in self-rejection, okay? And so another one is I'm permanently damaged. So I've said quite a bit. Any comments or questions so far? No? Yes?
Something you said earlier is I just had a conversation with someone not too long ago, and they were talking about someone who's been in foster care and who had been adopted at an early age. And I think when he came out of foster care and it was adopted, someone made the comment, "Oh, he was just 3. He was 3 years old."
Mhm.
So he doesn't know. I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, and that's, that's what we think, because if we don't know this, we don't know this. So the thinking was that he's not impacted by that. But because I know that at 3 years old, a lot has transpired.
Yeah.
At 3, but that's our thinking, and it's an honest thinking until we learn better.
Absolutely. I had 2 young kids when I first got into foster care and was working as a supervisor there. They had gone through extreme abuse and neglect. And one of the siblings was showing a lot more behaviors, acting out, rolling around on the floor, breaking things, whereas the brother did not. And he was younger, but then they felt, well, he's not going to remember. He's probably going to be good. But guess what? Down the line at about 14, it started to manifest in residential. He had to be put away, and so that's where I'm just like the importance of really working with kids even at that age. Sometimes they may not have words for it, but there are ways to help them get the words, and a therapist can really work on like things from play therapy, a lot of different things like that. So that is a very good point. I see it a lot. Anybody else? All right, so I just went into some of those manifestations when it comes to these negative cognitions, the mental health diagnosis, and you may wonder, well, how is that? But if you take someone who already has grown up or they've been mistreated in families, mental health diagnoses come about. And some people, like when it comes to substance use, you wonder, like, what caused this? And a lot of times we just think it's something in a snap where someone with an addiction needs to just get themselves together. No, it's not that simple. It's sometimes having to go back and really get to the root issues of why a person may be using in the first place. Attachment disorders is another thing too, because we talked about that trust versus mistrust. If you're more prone to mistrust, typically I would ask the question, was there something disrupted at birth or through childhood? Because in most cases, attachment can look either a kid is going, and I'll take the little kids that I talked about earlier. They would go into foster homes, and we had multiple placements. I was up at like 3 in the morning, where they're like, come get them, we're done, and these are little kids, like they were a lot. But the attachment, they were so used to just moving to home. As soon as they went to a new home, they immediately went in, where's our home? Where's our room? And they immediately went into calling the people mama and daddy, had no connection had been made whatsoever. So sometimes that attachment is too extreme, and then some people can be on the other, which is detachment, where you detach, I'm not trying to get close, and that is how you learn how to cope, with things. Learning disabilities, because going back to brain development, when we're looking at like trauma and how it correlates with some of the negative cognitions, you'll be surprised like how learning disabilities can come about. But I have seen that once interventions have been in place, that if a child or an adult, even adults, it's never too late, but even adults, how once again that brain can rewire itself, and things that used to be a block are no longer blocks. So it's amazing. And we're going to talk about intergenerational trauma just a little bit, because that's the other thing too. It didn't start with you. And going back to the person, whoever was 3, most people would say, like you said, like they don't know really what happened, but epigenetics, you don't have to know what happened. With epigenetics, it's just when things have happened generationally for us. Thank you. For some of us, we've never experienced slavery, or some people have never experienced the Holocaust who have ancestors from that. But we still carry that. And I can, for instance, this is a book too, it didn't start with you. It was a mom who was carrying her child, and her brother pretty much, he froze to death. It was like, it happened like 2 or 3 in the morning. Well, when the son was born and got a little bit older, at night he would start to shiver and have like nightmares and all of that, and they couldn't figure out. But when he went to the therapist, it was there that they determined that this brother had passed away. He had an uncle, but nobody in the family had talked about him because, you know, depending on your generation, what is it? We just hush, we go on, we act like things didn't happen, but it comes out in other ways. And so they were able to connect. He was having those experiences based off of what the mom was carrying within as far as like her anxiety and all of that associated with that. So it really is a real thing. All right, comments, questions? Y'all with me? Y'all good? Okay. All right, so we're gonna look a little bit at what is trauma. This is just like your emotional response to something that's distressing. It can look different. We're gonna look at the types here. There's acute trauma, and this is intense distress. Common examples, this could be a car crash, physical or sexual assault, sudden death of a loved one. And then there's complex. This is when it's been repeated. If you were to think about complex trauma, what would be an example of someone who experienced complex trauma? It's repeated.
Maybe a woman was being battered.
Yes, domestic violence. Did you say something about?
Domestic violence.
Yes. Also too, when you think, like you could take like sexual abuse, when that happens over and over, it's anything that can be repeated. Like it's not always those things, but things that happen repeatedly. And so that's the sense, and typically it's a sense of being trapped is a feature of this experience, okay? And there's a hyper vigilance and constant monitoring of the environment. And if you know somebody or if you're experiencing those things, because some people just feel like, well, I worry a lot. Well, it depends on what your worry looks like, because if it's to a point where there is extremes or if you're constantly on guard, you're watching, that may be some PTSD that has manifested you're not aware of. All right, so chronic trauma. These are like harmful events, repeated or prolonged. It could develop in response to persistent bullying, neglect, and another situation like we just said, domestic violence. So vicarious trauma. This is, oftentimes we don't have to witness it ourselves. Well, it doesn't have to actually happen to us. But we can witness or we can hear about it. Like I have to safeguard myself. I've learned how to like in my own way compartmentalize because I hear a lot of stories and a lot of people bring me their stuff. And so learning how to compartmentalize, but also too, you think like where social media is when we're constantly seeing shootings, when we're constantly seeing just what happened with George Floyd, some others, like witnessing that. This is when you witness it. It doesn't necessarily happen to you directly, but it impacts you at that same level, okay? And so we're gonna shift a little bit and we're gonna look at the family system now. So we're looking at multi-generational trauma here. And this is pretty much looking at just how trauma is passed down. I got a little bit into the epigenetics, I won't go far into that, but it's related to major events that oppress a particular group of people because of their status as oppressed, such as slavery, the Holocaust, forced migration. We're seeing a lot of that happening, a lot of different things happening there. And so we're gonna be looking at generational trauma here. So it was a year ago, in this room, we did a panel here, and it was called Inherited. And so it's understanding the effects of generational trauma. Because oftentimes when we think about what's inherited, we're always looking at what? Who's gonna get what? Do they got insurance? Is it a big policy that Granny finna leave me with? That kind of thing. But we don't think about how our behaviors, where that's inherited, how we treat one another, the things that we choose not to deal with. It still has its way in a family cycle of coming back. It may not hit you, you may run from it, but just like, that parent that I was saying in the book, it didn't start with you. That's a prime example. That little boy didn't know nothing about the brother who had passed, but yet he inherited that anxiety and different things like that. And so trauma isn't always individualistic. In most cases, it's inherited. Sometimes too, we don't want to face the facts on that. And that's not something that we want to have shame on. We need to be more open and have these conversations because typically, what do we say when it was like you got that family member and they're a little different? What's our saying for that? Huh? Black sheep too, yes. Black sheep comes in that as well. And also, what she say? Yes, they're a little crazy. It's just, they always been a little off. And we just go on about business, like.
thrown off.
Yeah, thrown off. He said thrown off. Right, and see, like, yeah, seriously, but then too, when you look at a lot of misinformation that's out there, even when it comes to the autism spectrum, like, we're saying, well, we didn't have all of this when it was like, yeah, y'all did. Y'all just didn't know what y'all was dealing with. Y'all didn't know, and it's actually, I got a few family members where I'm just like, I know they on the spectrum. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was for real. So I'm just saying that's just one of those situations where it's sort of like, we sort of like, once again, we'll tuck it away. It's just something wrong, throw it off or whatever. And I was reading some of the comments on social media for some young adults that are autistic, and they were saying, well, the thing is, we were just either beat to death or told, get over it. And that's true, and so now we're at a place where things are becoming more prevalent and known, and some people are questioning it. But it's been there. These things have been there, but when we go and we don't know what we don't know, or sometimes we do know things, but it can be a situation, and I see it in families a lot, where it could be this, but they don't want to accept that. Yeah. And so they don't want to start with the early intervention, because early intervention, I can't emphasize it enough. If you start early, you just don't know, the benefit that can do. I remember, and I'll just tell this story, like when I first got my granny at about 6, maybe somewhere in there. Either way it goes, I was going into the 1st grade. Everybody else they used to have these little rectangle sheets. Everybody was already reading, coming home. I couldn't read because my foundation had not been laid before that. I would come home crying every day, embarrassed. But my granny took it upon herself, walked to the school, and at that point they placed me in pre-first. I was smooth sailing ever since then, but nobody would ever know that I had those struggles. But the emphasis of early intervention and sometimes our shame will keep us from getting kids the help that they need, when honestly they could thrive later on if you start early with it. Okay, any comments, questions? Yes.
In past generations, it's been the same. What goes on in this house stays in this house. And I think that's how our struggles started.
Yes, yes.
What went on in the house. You didn't go to school and tell them, I'm sorry, haven't had anything to eat.
That's true.
Whatever. So I think as a culture, we've just, let's just keep this to ourselves, hush, hush.
Yes.
He's just slow, she's just slow, or whatever. And that's how we've gotten into the place where we are now.
Yeah, that's so true. That is so true. And we're going to talk about some of those how you meet those basic needs. Yeah, good point. Thank you. Go ahead.
Another thing that I noticed, and I guess we were just discussing this at church yesterday. We're doing a class, it's called Church Hurt.
That's good.
Culturally, this phrase, and I know everybody can identify with it, is, we're going to pray about it. Let's just pray about it.
Spiritual bypassing.
Pray, it will go away. And
Yeah.
that's not true. And I'm like, but God made us so complex. We need more than prayer. And He knows that we need more than prayer. But yet, in our culture, I find that we will say that. Let's just pray about it.
Yes. And I think, going back to this multi-generational trauma, and some populations of people have been more oppressed. At some point I could see how that just got all they had, but now that once again, I hope churches are moving in a direction of you just can't spiritual bypass. You know what I'm saying? Like, prayer is great, but that without is not what works. You got to have it both, so thank you for that. Anybody else?
I think you also have to check on the ones that seem well. Because
True
sometimes you seem like you're well, but you're not. And I know in my own family, I have someone that is suffering from mental illness. And to look at her, you would never in a million years believe that she's going through it. So what I'm hoping to get is, she have a therapist. Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
She have a therapist, but sometimes she will call me. And I just need, she did call me. She did. But sometimes she'll call me, because she's feeling down. And I try to talk to her and give her encouragement, but when I leave here, I'm hoping to get, information. How can I help her?
Yeah, that's good. So from the outside, how does she present on the outside? Is everything together, like?
Oh, she is beautifully.
Okay.
Everything is, she's beautiful, she's wonderful, she's smart, she's got a great job, and you would think everything is well,
Yeah.
but it's definitely not. But she acknowledges this.
Yeah, that's
And
good.
that's the good thing. She knows what's happening to her.
Right. And sometimes too, like, like we don't talk enough about like that high functioning depression and how it shows up. And then too, anytime you correlate high achievements, this person's the next thing, it's validation. And so it's message, and going back to core beliefs from that inner child work, it's like at some point I don't know her situation, but I'll just guess that at some point, probably achievement affirmed her, or maybe at some point it got her, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, I would love to dig deep on that,
It's
but.
definitely daddy issues.
Okay.
When you have daddy issues, and if you've never been in your life, then you want to make them, I'm gonna do so well, they're gonna be proud of you.
Yeah.
I think that's the best about it.
Yeah, it does, and sometimes that messaging that comes with that, they're proud. I'm telling you, that's a very good point. Thank you for sharing. Okay, well, trauma responses, just so you guys know, like the fight, flight, freeze. This typically with PTSD, if you experience that, in most cases, do you run when things get heated? Sometimes, something, a certain noise will make me like, what the heck, I'm out of here. It's just depending on what it was. This morning, like I was drinking a water bottle and it like popped real loud, but I was in the other room, I was like, what the heck, like what's going on? But yeah, that's just an example of like ready to fight, like you stay on guard, you don't, you stay ready so you don't have to get ready.
Yeah.
Yes, seriously. And I try to stay on ready at any time, and that's not always healthy. But then there's flight too. Flight can be a response. It's like, even when it comes to conflict, how we deal, like I hope nobody likes conflict. I don't necessarily like conflict, but I've learned ways in which to just address it. But sometimes it's easier just to run the other way when it comes to that. And then there's freeze. Some people are just like, well, why are you just standing there? Why are you, like, most people can. You see, like, when active shooters come, some people run, other people are just there in shock, can't move, So there are different responses to trauma. So now we're looking at this intergenerational trauma, and this is just it's just the illustration of how you see, like, each family here, and it's like the, looking at the European wars and how that's passed down, and then here you have surviving slavery, what that looks like, abandonment, domestic violence, and it's passed down. And so what I do love about this, when you work on your trauma, you choose not to pass it on to the next generation. And so just keeping that in mind, that we all have inherited different things, but we can learn ways to live life anew, reframe, and all of that. So questions, comments on that? Yes.
Everybody in here knows me, but I'm Queen H-A-A-N Christ, all Christ. I wear this every day. I am 75 years old now, and it wasn't a diagnosis back then, but I had a nervous breakdown when I was 10. So I've had a problem with depression since I was 10 years old. People that don't really know me, that I don't talk to them personally like that, don't know. So I have dealt with this, not in shame, but in what I don't know, but the 65 years, I'm now 75. So when you learn how to handle it, and like this, speak about it, only a few years ago that I was comfortable in saying, hey, I'm depressed. No, you can't move on.
Yeah.
But when you become a realist yourself, and I used to be a dwarfism with this diagnosis, but now I'm the giant of all kings.
Yeah.
So I'm not how to be with me.
Yeah, you're continuing to be a work in progress, like get better and better. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
I'm a work in progress.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So this says seeing unhealthy patterns in your family and deciding that those patterns end with you and will not be passed down to future generations is an extremely brave and powerful decision. I'm here to say, as a witness, as experience, your family won't like you for that in some cases. They will not like you for that. When you start to think differently, seeing some things that I don't know if I want to do it this way, sometimes you can ruffle some feathers, but stay the course, and especially when it comes to your mental health, because it's not just in my situation about me. I'm looking at I can learn from what I did and didn't have, and I'm taking that to apply for my kids so that maybe it can continue to get better and better, but someone has to make that decision, and sometimes we don't know what we don't know, which is why these types of settings are so important. Yes.
A question about that. How do you have any suggestions about how to balance that need for family connection with the need to separate from the same family? That's causing the trauma. Do you have any?
Yes. I'll say this: family is not always blood. It's not, and I know some people will, hit you over the head with that. But sometimes it gets to a point, just like that cognition, where it says, I cannot trust this, that you get to a point where you get to choose who you trust. Yeah. And so with that being said, I would say, and we're going to talk about community and connection in a minute, sometimes you have to, I shouldn't say have to, but sometimes it is in your best benefit to go outside of just blood relation. Now, I will say this, it could be a situation, I don't know the full circumstance, but I feel like sometimes where there's abuse, and I think too, just as a community, we look at family, we promote family. When there's constant abuse and your safety is at risk, and I'm talking about verbal, that emotional, a lot of times we're looking at, well, did they hit you? Did they bruise you? Sometimes it's not always showing up in the form of a bruise, but it's that mental. And I'm just like, if you've asserted yourself and you try to say hey, this is not helpful for me. I don't like when you do X, Y, Z. Can you please not do that? And if they continuously do that over and over, at that point, I feel like it's time to readjust. Because to keep putting yourself in that circumstance and that person is not honoring your feelings, then that's problematic. And I think that that's where it comes, where you have to sometimes make some tough decisions. And sometimes those kind of decisions don't happen overnight. It's not easy. So, did I answer you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, because like what you just said about how they should honor you.
Yes.
I think a lot of the difficulty comes, like she was talking about the church, where you get engraved, honor your mother and father, honor your family. So it's just trying to understand that balance. But that was, yes, you did.
Yeah, it is a balance, and it's not always easy too, because, and this is another thing where it's like the communication, because sometimes too, depending on how we've been raised, I'm going back to inner child stuff. And sometimes too, with generations, it's well, I'm the elder, I'm this, and that's true, but we also have to give respect to little people too. You know what I'm saying? They're people too. And so I think that that's an important key as well, but also when you're able to really look at, is this person benefiting? Well, what am I getting for this? And also too, going back to flight, some of us will just run from it, but we haven't had the first conversation to maybe give the person the opportunity to rectify it. Because we know sometimes communicating can be hard. And so we can set up boundaries, but other people may not know that that's a boundary, and we may just be off-standish, but they don't know. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's important to have the communication, give an opportunity. Yes. So good to see you too. Yes.
I was gonna say you can also limit your time.
Yes, yes.
Because action is so much louder than words. Sometimes you can have conversations with people and it's still not impactful.
It ain't, yeah.
It's because they're stuck in their ways, that's what they're used to, right? So you can still honor your mother, you can still honor your father, but you really like that, and I promise you, the way when you change, they'll see it. Right. And either they'll adjust or they won't.
They won't, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's good though.
And be careful when they say honor, but they never really allow parents provoke your children not to write. Be careful of that.
Yeah. Because there can be provoking in a number of things too, which is where I was going back with the little kid, little bit, they matter too. You got to affirm, because like I said, these most of us are adults in here. We still have that inner child that we're carrying inside of us. And going back to that, we get those messages on how do we move, do you go silent? More than likely, you probably could have been in an environment where you were told to just be seen and not heard. So some things we've got to unlearn and undo. All right, so one of my favorite illustrations here is when you're looking at that healthy brain versus an abused brain. Going back to the baby, going back to anybody who has trauma, it shows. And this is really a real scan of a brain. What do you see the difference in the abused brain versus that healthy brain? Yeah. Lots of spaces and yeah, the temporal lobes, all of that, you see that. Whereas the healthy brain, where do you see? Yeah. And so even there have been, like if y'all ever get a chance to Google where they're doing scans and it's like, you know, when you're looking at someone where they're receiving that love and affirmation, how the brain like lights up. It's a real thing, y'all, like the brain really does. But here, when you look at the abused brain, when we look at some of our kids, you know, going back to learning disabilities and all of that, is it that they're really incapable or is it trauma that has hindered their brain development? And for, I think men, if I'm correct, young men, is it 26 when the brain's developed? I think it may be like 22 or 3 for women. But your brain really is not, you know, fully developed until later on in young adulthood. And then sometimes too, we put a lot on kids. They should sit here, they should know this, that, and the other, but I'm like, they're not even operating with a full brain. And some of us still aren't either. Because when we look at the things that have happened to us that we are not addressing, you know what I'm saying? Just looking at that, like how, like I said, the brain is very important in how you connect. I can't say it enough with connection, okay? All right, so looking at where you feel what, this is another thing that is important. We must teach ourselves to be in tune with our bodies. Most of us have not been taught how to do that. A lot of us don't know how to sit and say, where am I feeling what? It's uncomfortable. We have to learn how to be in tune with our bodies in order to teach others and our kids. Because if you think about when you're mad, let's just call some things out. When you are angry, what does your body feel? How does your body respond? You said what? Tense, yeah. Rapid heart rate, sweaty palm, like everybody's different, you know? And so I think if we can become more in tune with our bodies, we can learn how to better promote self-care for ourselves, you know? And these are all things where I like promote therapy, like that can help you with this. I'm telling you, it's not just something like you can say, oh, I'm gonna go home tonight and be in tune. It's a technique to this. So it's a technique. All right, so window of tolerance. This is important too because when we're looking at like trauma, a lot of us don't know what our window of tolerance is. We take a ship that's sailing along, it's tolerating. But what happens when we're outside of our window of tolerance and everything is just loaded on us? What's going to happen to that boat? It's going to sink. And so we have to have an awareness about this. And it says when stress and trauma shrink your window of tolerance, it doesn't take much to throw you off balance, okay? And so it says here, when you work with a therapist, you can help expand that window of tolerance because we work on coping. And then you learn how to attend to your window of tolerance, okay? Because in most cases, we're hyper aroused. And when someone's like that, and that's another thing too, when it comes to, especially kids and just us as a people, when you're hyper aroused, that's not the time to reason with a person. You can't reason, and most of the time we want to just drill something in. You're not even at a point where you're able to do that. And so that's just something, let's calm down, let's get to a point and then come back. Sometimes we got to drop it and come back, okay? All right, so now we're going to look at it from the community view here. And I'm just going to talk through some mental health needs, okay? So when we're looking at this, it's really hard because I know that I'm guilty of this. Go see a therapist, this, that, and the other. But what I've started to do is really walk with people to help them to understand that when you reach out to a therapist, it may not be in a snap that they get back to you because so many people are seeking help now that it may be some days before you get a call back, and sometimes you just got to keep calling. I was working with a young lady who had lots of trauma. We started in January. We just got her connected maybe a week ago. And so you think about somebody who's really in crisis, a lot can happen between then. And so I just say there's a huge need for this. Mental health provider space, especially in this area, is hard, you know. And then also too, the lack of access to mental health. And so many people get overwhelmed by the long waiting list, and they're just like, forget it. And they may be at a point where they're ready to change. Let's just take someone on who is struggling with addiction. But at that point, they've relapsed again, because what's the point? And these are things that as a community, we have to continue to look at the drivers to this so they can be addressed. And the other thing is the high turnover, especially when it comes to community health. Like if you don't have your own private insurance, oftentimes you could be referred to a community mental, and nothing against them, because there are great people there. But once again, it's a long waiting list at times, and then not only that, it can come with a high turnover. And by the time someone gets used to someone, that person's out the door, and so that can be a struggle as well. And then so insurance barriers. A lot of therapists do not take insurance, it's private pay. I take insurance right now, I'm credentialed through United Healthcare, through the employer side, and then Cigna. But here's the thing, United Healthcare, you just $25 copay, and it's just like going to the doctor. Whereas Cigna, they want you to meet this high deductible. One girl had a deductible of $3,000, but by the time she pays out of pocket for that, we're already at the end of the year again, and she's starting over. So these are just some conversations that are important when we're saying seek help, seek help. There are a lot of barriers, and hopefully some policies can happen where it becomes, better for people. Comments or questions there? All right, so I'm gonna look just a little bit at the silent generation. I'm going somewhere here with this. What do we know about the silent generation? How many people were raised by the silent generation? Or are the silent generation? Okay, so when we look at the silent generation, when you look at, a parent, grandparent, what was how did they cope?
Sweeping under the rug.
Sweeping under the rug, okay, what else?
What goes on in this house?
That's just the way grandma is. That's just the way grandma is.
That's just the way they are, yes. Well, I heard somebody over here.
What goes on in this house stays in this house?
Yes, silent, and my granny's favorite. What can you do about it now? They gone on. Ain't no use to crying about it. I'm just like, what? Why, Helen? Why? Seriously, it's like, wait, it ain't gonna bring her back. Well, I know that, but can I have some release? Because that's the other thing. If there's healing that comes in tears, sometimes you may not can do anything about it, but crying about it can get released, So anyway, but yeah, just I love the silent generation, but it is, yes.
My grandma used to tell me, mind your business.
Yes. Private. And that goes back to that shame too. A lot of the shame is not talked about and different things like that. The reason I'm bringing this up from a family perspective, because I'm going to be moving into a little bit, just a tad bit of Gen Z things. How has, even though they didn't talk about it, they, hush, hush, this, that, and the other, how did their mental health show up in other ways? They were silent, we ain't gonna talk about it, what can we do about it now? Illness, yes, that's what I'm looking for. High blood pressure.
Diabetes.
All of it's related, y'all.
Depression.
Yeah, the physiological.
Obesity.
Yes. All the I'm telling you. And so although they thought that they were just pushing it, going on, what can you do about it? It's still manifests in different ways. Were you gonna say something?
They say that they stuffed it, they kept it inside.
Yes.
Ate them up from the
Yes. And we can all agree too, depending on which generation, we can understand the why. But it always can't remain the reason, especially as we're looking at, generation to generation. All right, so identity formation, and we're coming to a close in just a second. This is the first, one of the developmental stages when you're in that age category, maybe going into a young adult. But this right here is where Gen Z, they lack awareness or purpose. And I think some of us, maybe we still try to figure out what do we put on earth for. And so in the fall of 2018, Pew Research Center surveyed 920 Americans ages 13 to 17 about the problems they have seen amongst their peers. They weren't concerned about teenage problems like unplanned pregnancy, binge drinking. They were more concerned about their mental health. fully 70% of those respondents thought anxiety and depression were a major issue among their peers. Also, too, in this book, it's Tim Elmore, and it's on Gen Z. He talks about, like, for Gen Z, you got 7 seconds to get their attention. 7 seconds. That's how their mind, they're on to the next, because when you look at Gen Z, they haven't been without internet, all these different things, and so that is how they have been wired. But in this research too, they are also the most resilient. They look at ways to think outside of the box. You take a young man, and I want to say that it happened when the flood happened in Louisiana, but he was playing his game, and it tells the story. He was playing his video game, and the waters kept rising. And at that point, he was able to get out, or whatever, some of his family, but his friend had messaged him and said, the water's getting high, I don't know how we're gonna get my family out. And they're talking through the game system. So this young man who's Gen Z ended up taking a mattress, and he blew it up, and he saved over 9 people, floating them on that air mattress. And they said it was alligators and everything, and he ended up winning a prize for that. But this is when I say a lot of times we go, oh, Gen Z, each generation is like, oh, we don't know what we're gonna do, they're doomed. You know what I'm saying? But it's important to understand with Gen Z, there are a lot of strengths, even when it comes to entrepreneurship, they're not working these, traditional jobs. It's like they have a different way of thinking, and so that's important too. But I say with the identity formation, in most cases, we come to suicide, and typically the driver to suicide can be a lack of purpose. Because the drivers go up when it comes to, if I don't know where I was put here on earth, my mama didn't want me, my daddy didn't want me, I was told I wasn't nothing, all these things. Yeah. What purpose do I have? And so everyone needs training, not just professionals. Believe the person. When they say I'm going to kill myself, most of the time you just want attention. We gotta watch some of the things that we're saying, because there is something greater going on that is causing them to feel like that. And then learn how to use direct questions, which I'm gonna go over some of those direct questions in a second. But I share this picture here because when we look at inner child, this is my brother Tay. This is Tay, probably at about 6. And then that's him as an adult. And so when we look at inner child, how that follows us, we weren't raised in the same household. We had different experiences. He was exposed to more things. And it got to a point where both of us had our seasons of mental health, and with my interventions, I was able to overcome. And he died still trying to overcome those things, but it got to a point where he was hopeless. And then too, I'll go into some of the drivers, like when you have alcoholism and all of that. He ended up dying by suicide. And so when we look back on some of those core beliefs, with some of the abuse and all of those things, I could give you a whole laundry list of some of the negative cognitions we were constantly trying to overdo. And oftentimes too, we talk about caregiving that's needed for people who care for the sick, whether it's a sick parent who has diabetes or cancer or whatever. But I think we need to start looking at when we have family members who consistently go through mental health, because it becomes stressful. Because and people will come up to me after, why do y'all this? What we did, we tried, we did, and so there are a lot of things. This didn't just start a year ago. This is, and so that's the thing too. It's just like really looking at too like that caregiver support, because when you're constantly having to go to the ER, call crisis, pretty much. I say choke them out because we get into it at times, like, well, you get in together, but it's just that just some examples of real life. Like, coming from that first developmental stage on up, it matters, y'all. That inner child, you see him as an inner child, everybody has their inner child. There's a little Darlene, there's a little Sandra, there's a little Tara. Like, we all have that inner child that we're carrying, Questions, comments there? Okay. So this is something else to know, and this is just from a community standpoint when we're looking at this, because here in Williamson County, I think the number when I looked at it, last year in Williamson County, 13 people died by suicide. It's 13. Most of them were gunshot wounds, And then also too, majority were men and white men at that. I think it was maybe like 2 black men.
Yeah.
And so that is something to really think about going back to the silent generation, but even when we're looking at that and how men carry things and how we affirming men to have that safe place where they can be more open and express the things that they're going through. So just being aware of anniversary triggers, because that's the thing too. Sometimes when trauma happens, you remember when it happens. And although you may not remember the date, your body keeps the score on all of that. And so please know that substance, if you have someone that is suicidal, if they are using substances, it's going to increase their risk even more, okay? Learn the whys to a person going to extreme measures, because it's not always just attention. Sometimes they don't have the words or the verbiage to say, I just really need you to come sit with me right now. You know, and then also too, making sure weapons and harmful items, they need to be removed. I can't tell you enough. I go back and forth with families all the time. Well, I'm not locking out. I'm not being a prisoner in my own house. Well, what is it going to take? Is it after they get a hold of it? Is that when shoulda, coulda, wouldas? I'm just direct like that, because when it comes to suicide, we have to be direct. It ain't no time to, it's an uncomfortable conversation to have. And then there's also a myth that I don't want my kid to know about this because it's going to put thoughts in their head or going to make them. No, it's not. So yes, did I see a hand? No? Okay. And then pull on protective factors, and we're going to talk about that. Get the person involved. If there are the right people, whether they are Believers Church, where to refer them, how to stay with them. It's tiresome. And in some cases, unfortunately, we're not always successful at getting them the healing on this side. I'm just gonna be honest. And that's the other thing too, staying with them. And so these are just some questions here when it comes to this. If you Google the CSSRS, and these are the questions, these are just a guide. Like if someone were to come to you, this is pretty much going to let you know where they fall, whether they're low risk, moderate, or whatever. But it's pretty much, have you wished you were dead or wish you could go to sleep and not wake up? Because here we're looking at, it's not always like the behavior, they have a plan, but we're looking at like, are there thoughts there? Have you actually had any thoughts about killing yourself? And then it goes on, if yes, it tells you to skip down. Have you been thinking about how you might do this? Because now we're looking at the plan. Because it's one thing if it's just ideations, we'll safety plan around those things. But when there's a plan in place and they're starting to make moves, you're moving more towards that high risk. Have you had thoughts and had some intention on acting of them? And then have you started to worked out the details? Because right now that's high risk. And then have you done anything, started to do anything or prepared? Because what has happened with the research that was done here with the this is Columbia Suicidal Severity Risk something. Just look that up because I don't remember it. But what they were saying is they were seeing a lot of people come into the ER. And so they would miss the person. They'd ask them, well, you got any thoughts? So, no, I don't. But then they don't go any further with the questions and they miss the person who has the weapon in the car or at home. And so that's what I'm saying. When people start to talk like this, we need to make sure, are there medications? How do we secure them? Remove those things because we want to mitigate the risk. But let's just say you get here, it is high risk. At that point, you need to call the suicide crisis. You can call depending on who. You may not always want to call the police. I said call the crisis line because not everybody's trained at how to handle that, and it can be scary for some people. But with that being said, you stay with them. Don't leave them. Stay with the person, okay? Any comments or questions? I just hit y'all with a lot, but the community suicide is, like I said, it's at an all-time high. Yes.
What's the stats on the homeless people? I've heard that a lot of them have mental health issues.
Yes. Yes, it is correct. I don't know the exact one, but in most cases that's trauma too, unresolved traumas. And that's a situation too when you see people on the sides of the road. Well, where's it? You'll think, well, where's their family? Aren't they family? Sometimes families have tried to intervene, but because, like I said, the mindset and the mental illness, it keeps them in that cycle, And not everybody, but it's not always easy as people think,
Because a lot of times people say, well, they have family and
Yes.
They won't let them live with them.
Look, I've been there. Been there. Sometimes it's just like we said, it gets to a point where you're at risk if you allow certain things, and you know, so yes, but that's true. And I will say this too. If that's the situation, learn how to, I say, have multiple perspectives, because sometimes we can just look at things tunnel vision from one perspective. Oh, that's a shame. We've been told they got all these rental properties and they can't put such and such in the house. That is not how it works, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can't just scoop up. You know, it takes things to, you know, it takes money to do those things, and sometimes, you know, sometimes the way a person needs help is not providing them with just a place to live, because trust me, did that for 3 months and it was a disaster, going back to the trauma, the mental health, and getting them to a point where they come out of it being in denial and moving to a point where I'm ready to make some change. And that can sound rough, but depending on addiction, sometimes you do have to be more straightforward, you know, and yeah, and sometimes help isn't always family. So thank you for asking that though. Yes.
Many years ago, I remember there used to be more mental institutions, but now they're just picking people up and sending them to jail.
True, that's true.
So jail is not.
It's not.
There's no health program.
Yes.
So I don't know, especially with the budget cuts now, I don't know what the solution is with that.
Yeah, because you make a good point too. I just had a friend that he was pretty much killed while being incarcerated, but he had gone back multiple times, but he had all these mental health issues and his family had advocated for that. But it's like, you know, the penitentiary, that's not a place to reform and to really, although we've been conditioned to sort of think that, it's, yeah, it's the exact opposite when you look at research and stuff. So, all right, so this is just looking at basic needs. Oftentimes too, when we're looking as a community, we've got to meet basic needs. Because I can't talk to you or address my trauma when I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to lay my head, or if I'm going to be fired, or if my kids need something to eat. And this is going back to, do I have air, water, food, the basic needs? Do I have a place of love and belonging, esteem? And then looking at a desire to become the most that one can be. And you see that that's at the top, because really and honestly, we got to start at the bottom with people. We're really addressing, like, are your needs being met? You know, and sometimes too, I think we need to work on having more empathy, and as we're looking to help people, so that we can move them up to a point of that self-actualization. So when we're looking at community, you know, we're looking at the hierarchy of needs here. That's important. And then this is too, just from a social worker standpoint, when it comes to the community, we have to be person and environment. Because most of the time we're looking at a person and they may have a lot going on. And it's like, what's wrong with them? They shouldn't they learn by now? But it's not. As you know, those people who've studied trauma, it's not about what's wrong, it's about what's happened. There's a lot that has happened in these systems of, you know, work, school, family, you know, and you go up to, you know, the next system. And so that's when, as social workers, we're looking at the person in environment. And then we're building from that and addressing those things. So I think that that's something, like going back to empathy, we have to keep in mind. Partnerships, can't say this enough, especially what we're seeing now and going through some things, like we got all these questions about funding and all of these things. We can no longer stand to survive independently. And what I mean by that is, you know, there are many efforts in our community to lessen the territorial mindsets. And we have to bind together for a healthier community. We cannot do this alone. We have to learn how to partnership, because somebody their scope may be over here. My scope may be over here, but if we bring those together, going back to person and environment, we may be able to meet each level of need there. But we've got to get to a point where we recondition the way we think, because connection rewires that brain, okay? So the last video is like 2 minutes. This is on empathy, and then I will close out. This is one of my favorite things, because as we're looking at things from a community perspective and mental health, there's a lot that I did not go over tonight, but it's just trying to get it within this time frame. But this is by Brene Brown, and this is looking at how do we have empathy, and just think about how do you respond to people when they're going through difficult times.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
These are, I just always show my references. I like to give people their credit. And thank you, Ms. Alma, for inviting me. That's the end. If y'all got questions, I'm here for that. A little bit over 5 minutes, but. Thank you. Y'all want me to sit? Y'all got, yeah.
I'm sure they got more questions. This has been amazing. Don't be shy. Ask her questions. We're blessed to have her tonight. We don't know when we'll get her back, so you better take it.
Yes.
I would just like to bring out that not necessarily is it always something that you think would be the normal things that cause trauma.
True that.
Just recently, my sister died unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with having a total knee, and within 48 hours, she had thrown a clot and was dead. And I was scheduled to have my surgery the next 2 weeks. That was trauma, and that was traumatic. And it's like, where was I mentally? Not good. Not good, even though we were strong Christians, that had nothing to do with what we were going with right at that time. It was your physical, mental health. And it's totally different. But I say that to say this. After crying and grieving for 6 weeks, crying every day and not sleeping, it's like, okay, I worked in mental health long enough to say, I gotta get help. I need help. So I set up my own, set up with a counselor and went to mental health counseling for a year and a half. I really just stopped the first of the year and was able to go and get my surgery after going through the therapy and taking some good drugs.
Thank you for saying that too. Yeah, thank you for saying that.
To take medicine, guys. People have
That's
I
for real.
still need medicine.
Yeah.
I took my Wellbutrin, I still take my Wellbutrin. So, but I'm just saying, those things you have to, you know, it's good to just say, I'm not doing good with this. You know, death is one of the things, is one of the high level stressors. And, you know, death, divorce, separate, all those kind of things. But that was really traumatic. And then it's like, I had to cancel the surgery naturally because I wasn't mentally prepared for that.
Right.
My doctor understood. He's like, no, you are not, we're gonna go through this together. And that's what we did. My grandchildren were like, no, Granny, don't, because they had been traumatized.
Vicarious,
Great aunt had died when we were supposed to be going on to Hawaii the next summer. And all those things. So, you know, it was like, oh, I gotta do something to get myself ready. I know my knee needs to be repaired, but I need to be repaired mentally to go in and go through that type of stress to get a knee replacement. So thank goodness I got help. I stayed in therapy. It's okay to go to a therapist.
Yes.
I went to a therapist regularly and got myself to where I could go and have my surgery. I'm now recovered from my surgery and going on. But I just emphasize that. Don't just think because you're going through that, oh, I just got to keep going through without getting help. Get help. Reach out to somebody if you need help. Try to get help. Reach out. And we've had an 18-year-old that went through depression and thoughts of suicide. My daughter's oldest son, when the pandemic came, it was traumatic. And he was always an introvert, kind of a loner. Had a small circle of friends. And when they couldn't be together, it was a whole different thing for him. He went into depression. He became suicidal. My daughter called me one night from Franklin. She lives in Atlanta. She's like, Mama, I think I need to get help for Garrison. And he was exhibiting all the signs of depression. So at that point, I said, ask him about suicide. And she's a, you know, Cheryl has psychology degree, a vocal rehab specialist. I said, ask him if he is thinking about killing himself. And he said, well, I had thought about it. And at that point, I said, do not wait. Go to the closest emergency room and they will know what to do. Give him help immediately. Do not say we're going to do it in the morning because the morning may not come. And so sure enough, she took him that night. They did the psych crisis counselor come into the ER. They would not let him go back home. They immediately took him into inpatient adolescent psych unit. So that's when I said, it's okay to reach out and get help and don't try to hide that your child is depressed. And once Cheryl got him into the facility, I went down like the next day, but that night I told her, I said, go to the room, see if, I said, first of all, get all the knives, belts, whatever, in a location to lock them up, and then go to the room and see if you find a suicide letter or some kind of note that, and let's see where he was mentally. She searched the whole room. She called me back in about 3 hours crying. She said, Mama, I found the letter.
Oh, wow.
He had a letter. He had a plan. And the letter was hid in a pair of socks in his drawer. So he had a plan and he has the letter. So, you know, getting him help, he's been able to go on. He since graduated from high school. He tried to go to college. He's still in mental health. He tried to go to college. He went away to Albany State, HBCU, and he did one semester and then he just couldn't do it. Mentally, he just couldn't do it. And that, you know, we had to go get him from there. But one thing about him, he turned 19, and at that point, he's like, I don't have to take this medicine. I'm grown, I can decide now for myself.
Yeah.
So one of his medicines, he decided he wasn't gonna take anymore. And between me and his aunt and his mom, he decided he would continue to take an antidepressant. So we got him on a low dose medicine now, but he's still in counseling. And so if your child is saying they ain't gonna kill itself, listen, believe them until you know better.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that transparency too, because I was gonna say, I think you're a prime example of what you said about how we can be attuned to the Holy Spirit for believers and also know the intervention that needs to take place. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. And another thing is too, one last thing, you hit on grief. And I think that's one of those things too, where after a certain point, it does become depression and other things. And it's a thing such as broken heart syndrome, where it kills because once again, you're holding all of that. So we've got to talk. Thank you for saying that. And lastly, and I'm done, I promise, medication. I think that we also need to be mindful of the things we're saying, especially from the pulpits. Because we know, especially amongst believers, I've heard pastors say, you don't need that pill, you got and I'm just like, you don't know, somebody could be dealing with schizophrenia and you disrupted their they've been on going back smooth sailing in their window of tolerance, and here you go saying something like this, not understanding mental health, and then they go and now they decide, well, he told me I don't have to, the Lord, and then now that family is left to deal with the crisis of that. So we've got to be mindful of the things that we're saying to people.
You take medicine for everything else.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? You got high blood pressure, you take your medicine. You got diabetes, you take your medicine.
Yes.
If you vitamin deficiency or iron deficiency, you take your medicine.
Yeah.
So it's okay to not be okay.
Absolutely. Say that.
It's okay not to be okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
In closing, I'd just like to say thank you to Erica and Miss Harrison. We think that when we were born, God has the DNA for us.
Yes.
Everything that has happened to you is for right now for such a time.
It is.
as this. And a lot of times we get ashamed of our background, but we
That's
have
true.
to take it
Yeah.
because God has a plan. In Jeremiah 29:11.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you so
And
much.
that's the same for your grandbaby too. He may not at this point be like he said, like college was too much. I got to that point. People don't know. I was supposed to go to Western, but because I hadn't dealt with stuff, I had a nervous breakdown, I had to come back. But then later on, and I still ended up probably graduating before most of so I'm just saying, like once he works through, it's never too late. So you never know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Erica.
All right, thank you.
So powerful. What a testimony, y'all. This has been amazing, and we really, really appreciate you, and thank you so much. Give her one more hand, please. I have one other thing. Take my picture out and put your business card up there, because people try to need her. There are people who may need you.
Yeah, I do have cards. Yeah, I got cards. I'll put it back on the thing.
There you go. Thank you so much. Well, at this time, we would like to ask Ms. Alma McLemore to come up and present a book to you. A book that she wrote, or we can do it if you don't want to get her. Yeah, they are, her and Helen, her grandmother, were best friends with Ms. Alma. And so Ms. Alma wanted to definitely be here. But if you want to just do it from there, you don't have to get up, okay? So, yeah. Okay. And then, if you want to have a few words, Ms. Alma?
You want the mic?
Most everybody knows Miss Alma McLemore. She is a Williamson County African American historian. She's written many, many books. She's one of the founders of the African American Heritage Society. She is our board emeritus of the African American Heritage Society. So we're always happy to have her, and she's done so much for the community. Let's give Ms. Alma a hand as well. Without her, the history wouldn't be told. So we would like for you, as a dear friend of Erica's grandmother, to present your book, and you can sign it for her later. So, you want to present that to her, and you can have words that you want to say.
Erica, I've known you since you were a little bitty girl as a friend of your grandmother, Helen Lee Cannon. It's an honor to see how you have progressed and an awesome thing that you are doing and what you have accomplished and how you are reaching out to help the community. I would like to present you with this book. It's called Natchez Street Area Revisited, Volume 1. I have 3 already that's finished, that's been published, 2 that's currently finished. I just have to do the index. It's Natchez Street Revisited, Volume 4 and 5.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
For you to have.
Yes, I appreciate this. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, photo?
Yeah, y'all too.
What, you, okay.
Come on, get in this picture, girl.
Thank you so much, we appreciate it. And we also have everybody also have a gift card for you.
Okay.
And also we have a membership. You can be a member as a business, and that membership is valued at $100, or a family, which is valued at $35. So you choose. But we really, really appreciate you, and there's we couldn't pay you enough for what you've done today. And we're just so grateful that you took the time out of your schedule. And we're so grateful for everybody who comes and supports our Porch Talks. Aren't they amazing? Don't we have wonderful speakers? And don't we learn something every time that we come? So thank you once again.
Thank you.
Does anybody else? Oh, we have our board chair. Come on up, Pam. She's going to share something with you all.
Now it's time for announcements.
Yeah.
So I would like to announce that the annual Tom D. Burdick Scholarship Prom will be held July 19th. So get your planners out. Get your planners out. July 19th. And this year we have 4 couples competing to be the prom king and queen. We have Wayne and Angela Jackson. Everybody know Wayne and Angela Jackson here? Okay, we have Bernard and Vanessa Jones. Oh, okay. Shout out. Then we have Dion and Tabitha Sanders. You all know them? Yes. And our 4th couple is Kevin and Dorothy Townsend. So we want you to come and support this for a good cause, for our scholarships. And it's in remembrance, of course, of our dear friend Tom E. Burdick, who was a trailblazer in the community. So mark your calendars, July 19th. We would be so happy to have you. You can have a table or 2 tables. It's not like the black tie. We don't have everybody like this scrunched in. We got maybe 200 to 300 people. So if you would like to purchase tickets, we have a name and a number. Or a contact with Gmail, or you can go, of course, online and purchase them, AAHS, WC. But also, you can purchase them in person at some point without paying that fee. Or let us know that you would like to purchase tickets. So,
we do.
numbers, and here's the flyer.
Yeah. We have some outside as well. And we have we have a past queen. If you want to stand Emma Witherspoon, she and James Witherspoon was a queen. And we also have a past candidate, Sue Lane. Donnell's not here, Stan Sue. These wonderful people raised money for the Murdoch Scholarship. And you all did too by purchasing tickets. So we've actually had $63,000 we've raised over the last year since 2015. So we've given a lot of scholarships to high school seniors. So we appreciate y'all support in everything that we do. And anything else? Does anybody have anything else they'd like to say or add or comments?
King and queen are Roy and Lisa Brown.
Right.
So come and watch Lisa and Roy do their last role, and he always does some wonderful entertainment. But make sure, let us know if you're interested in
Well, thank you all so much, and I guess that concludes our Porch Talk, and we'll be sending out information on the next one, and we appreciate you all coming.
Thank you, Erica, again.
Give us one final hand. Thank you so much.